Good evening, everyone. I want to welcome you to this regularly called meeting of the Temple City Council. It is 5 p.m. on August 3rd. Our first thing to do is I'm going to ask you to please rise, and we'll have Deputy City Secretary Liz Caraway lead us in the invocation, which will be followed by the pledge led by our City Secretary, Jana Llewellyn.
Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, my prayer tonight is simple. Rain for our parched land. We pray for sustained rainfall to nourish our soul, replenish our water sources, renew the ground, and bring relief to all living beings. Thank you for your many and abundant blessings. Thank you for the ability to be involved in useful work and for the honor of bearing appropriate responsibilities. Thanks as well for the freedom to embrace you. Thank you for loving us from your boundless and gracious nature. I pray for our mayor, for the various levels of city officials, and in particular for this assembled council. I'm asking that you would graciously grant them the ability to recognize the ways in which they are blessed to build a community of excellence that is characterized by their spirit of service. Father God in heaven, I ask you to give our city council and leaders the courage to speak in the meeting if they have reason to, and that the meeting would be in the best interest of everyone involved. The decisions made tonight can make huge impacts in our community, and so give them your wisdom that is from above. Open all of our minds to the ideas of others and open our ears to hear the words of others and to make fair assessments of what others might say and to treat with dignity and respect everyone who is present tonight. In your gracious name I pray. Amen.
Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, ladies. We'll now move on to public comments. Any citizens who desire to address the council on any matter may do so. We ask you step to the podium and state your name for the record. Please limit your comments to no more than 3 minutes and no final action will be taken. We have one person who signed up, Mr. Hensley.
Thank you, sir.
You bet. I know. I know. You need to keep moving. You're going to get us all in trouble.
Mr. Mayor and Council, my name is Milton Hensley. I live at 301 Metro Drive, Temple, Texas. This is something that I'm going to discuss that's going to be affecting everyone. Now, I don't, in the last billing, utility billing, there's a little place there and it said that the Temple is considering increase in water rates. At the present time, I asked the council not to impose an increase in water rates during this drought condition. My last water bill was doubled. And I am watering my pecan trees, my grass. And I was telling Dana as we're coming up here, I can't even tell it. I mean, it's just, it's going the wrong way. And so this was the tax or the increase in water bill. I'm going to say, well, it was in Bill Jones' administration when he was mayor. The water rates was increased, but there was a group that asked not to increase the water rates while there was a drought though. And the council did not increase the water rates during the drought period. this is what I ask you to do again. If I know you're not going to answer my question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. When were the water rates going to be increased? That was in the statement. That's all I got to say. Thank you, sir.
So we can answer that. The water rates would be increased with the annual budget, which would take place October 1st.
Yes.
So an increase in water rates wouldn't be due to the drought. It would be due to budgetary needs coming into the next year, which begins October 1st.
Yes. Well, what I am asking, if this drought continues past October, I'm asking that you not increase. I know you're going to increase the price of the water, but I'm asking you to not increase the price of the water until this drought condition is over. That's what I'm asking.
Understood.
Not to, you're going to increase the water rate, but just think about our pocketbook. It is price of eggs, price of bacon.
You're getting off topic.
And price of water.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like he wants to go to breakfast. Thank you, Milton.
Yes, sir.
You bet. Okay, next item on the agenda is special recognitions. We'd like to recognize the Friends of the Temple Public Library for their fundraising efforts and donation for the Temple Public Library bookmobile. Ms. McAdams.
Thank you, Mayor. If I could please have the Friends, the members of the Friends who are here with us, come to the front. And Ms. Susan Long, Councilmember Long, would you mind coming up as well? Since you've been involved with the Friends and involved with the library for so long. And I've got a certificate here for them. So good evening, everyone. Tonight, we wanted to recognize the Friends of the Temple Public Library for their fundraising efforts and for their donation to the library for their new book or for our new bookmobile. Each year, the Friends conduct 2 book sales and host a year-round sale in the Book Nook. And from those funds every year, they have saved up money for a new bookmobile to replace the bookmobile that they originally helped in purchasing. The bookmobile brings audiobooks, movies, books, and programming to all corners of our community. Through community events, housing events, school visits, daycare visits, and more. This year, the Friends of the Library contributed $83,000 to the purchase of a new bookmobile that is currently being built and should arrive for our use in the next year or so. Every year, dozens of members of the Friends of the Library volunteer their time to sort through thousands of materials and work tiring hours during their week-long book sales, such as the Labor Day book sale that's coming up the week of August 28th. The funds from these programs bring us more than just the bookmobile that we'll be getting, but also programs for children and adults throughout the year. So tonight we wanted to recognize their hard work and say thank you for everything they do to support literacy in Temple and the Temple Public Library. Please join me in applauding them for their efforts. And then Ms. Long, would you like to present them with a
Well, I
certificate?
have the honor of presenting a certificate to the president of the Friends. I get this honor, the mayor's letting me do it. Many of you in this room have heard me talk about the Friends many times, but you have to hear it again. And this relates to what Liz said. Where's Liz? Liz here in her prayer back here. Liz taught, and I'm not going to have the words correctly, but she said something about helping the community, representing the community. These ladies and gentlemen, I'm so sorry. We always have, and we appreciate all of your hard work. These people represent the best of what brings things to the community. Just think about it, $83,000. And that was raised through donations of used books to the library and some library discards. But these people take these books, they haul them upstairs, they sort them by category, and there are lots of arguments about category. What category is this going? And I used to be one of the biggest arguers about categories, and I can say that. but they sort them by category and they pack them in flats. And then as the sale is coming, they haul all these flats to the third floor room and unpack them in the proper category, bit by bit. And as they sell, they bring more flats forward and unpack those and sell them. So everybody go to the sale twice a year, spend lots of money, get great books, and let's do this again. Thank you all.
Take it through the drive-through. Very nice job, Susan.
Thank you all so much for that. That is the true spirit of volunteerism. So thank you for reaching in the community and giving a helping hand. You bet. Thank y'all
Bye, Nikki.
really so much. Okay, moving on to our next item. Item 4 is the first reading and a public hearing to consider adopting an ordinance approving the tax roll and authorizing the calculation of the amount of tax that can be determined for all real and personal property in the city for fiscal year 2024, which is tax year 2023. Item 5 is the first reading in a public hearing to consider adopting an ordinance setting a tax rate at $0.613 per $100 valuation, comprised of $0.2738 for maintenance and operations and $0.3392 for debt service for fiscal year 2024, which is tax year 2023, and making the appropriation for the regular operation of the city. Ms. Bernard.
As as the mayor just read, we're at the August 3rd, 2 weeks before the final adoption of the budget is scheduled for August 17th. This process began way back in January. The proposed tax rate that is before you is 0.6130. We've received the certified tax roll and also the calculations of the various tax rates. The no new revenue tax rate is 0.5456. And the notice and hearing rate is the same. And then the voter approval tax rate is 0.6272. Just as a refresher, the no new revenue tax rate is the total tax rate needed to raise the same amount of property tax revenue for the city from the same properties in both tax years. And then the voter approval tax rate is the highest tax rate that the city may adopt before the city is required to hold an automatic election to approve the tax rate. And again, the proposed rate is 0.6130. The voter approval rate is 0.6272. The components of the tax rate, we have the general M&O rate, which is proposed at 26.7 cents. That is a decrease of 0.0193 cents compared to the previous year. And then the debt service rate that services the debt that is issued for capital improvements, 34.60 to make up the total 6130. Reviewing the property tax roll and tax levy, which are agenda item 4 and 5. We look at the proposed ordinance that will approve the ad valorem property tax roll certified by the Tax Appraisal District of Bell County in a total amount of $9.7 billion. Breaking that down into what was the tax roll was the total was not 100% of it was not certified. There's still properties that are under review. Those amounts relate to or equal 605 million. The amount that's of the property tax roll that is actually approved by the ARB Appraisal Review Board is 9,140 million. And this represents the grand total of the 9.7 billion, which is a 19.63% increase compared to that of the prior year. I also note here that when you look at the composition of the tax roll, you have the city of Temple, you have the frozen tax, the freeze taxable values, And then also the increment that goes to the tax increment district. And it totals $1,061,820,000, which is a 35% increase compared to the same amount in the previous year. Can you advance that one slide, please? Looking at the levy, the tax levy at the proposed rate of 6130. The total for the would be $50.9 million. Of that amount that goes to the maintenance and operation or general fund is 24.7 million. The amount that would be levied to the interest and sinking fund is $26.193 million. And then the tax levy for the tax that would go to the tax increment district reinvestment zone is 6.5 million. And that shows the total levy of an increase within the M&O and INS levy of a little over 7 million. The increase in the levy for the reinvestment zone is 1.6 million. And again, as we look at the calendar, the budget is scheduled for adoption on August 17th. There'll be the final public hearing on the tax rate, the final reading of approving the tax roll and levying taxes, and then the final reading of setting the tax rate. And I'd be happy to answer any questions related to that.
Thank you, Ms. Bernard. Council, any questions for Ms. Bernard? Nothing? All right. Item 4 is subject to a public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak on this matter may do so. We just ask you step to the podium and state your name for the record. Okay, there being none, then I'll entertain I will open the public hearing on item number 5. Anyone on the virtual platform? No? All right, well, very good. Then council, at this time, I will entertain a motion for item 4.
I'll make a motion to approve item 4.
I'll second that motion.
We have a motion, pardon?
Oh, I was
Okay.
waiting, things didn't pop
All right. We had a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Walker. We had a second by Councilmember Long. Council, please cast your vote. Item 5 passes 5 votes to 0. I'm sorry, item 4 passes 5 votes to 0. Moving on to item 5, council, if there are no additional questions, and I'll entertain a motion on item 5, and please know you've got special motion language at your seat.
Mayor, I'll do this motion. I move that the property tax rate be increased by the adoption of a tax rate of 0.6130, which is effectively a 12.35% increase in the tax rate.
We have a motion by Councilmember Long. We have a second by Councilmember Pilkington. Council, please cast your vote. Item 5 passes 5 votes to 0. Moving on to the next item, which is a consent agenda. All items listed under this section are considered to be routine by the city council and may be enacted by one motion. If discussion is desired by the council, any item may be removed from that consent agenda at the request of that council member and will be considered separately. During workshop, it was agreed that we would remove item K from the consent agenda. Council, is there anything else that needs to be removed? Nothing? Very good. And at this time, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda, which is items 6A through 6Q minus item K.
Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda items 6A through 6Q minus 6K.
Second it.
Have a motion by Councilmember Long. We have a second by Mayor Pro Tem Walker. Council, please cast your vote. Um, 6A through 6Q less K passes 5 votes to 0. Council will entertain a motion on item 6K. Are you presenting 6K?
I'm sorry, no, I'm just a little.
You're there
early.
early. That's what that's what I thought.
Threw me off.
Mayor Pro Tem's over here being sure I'm running the meeting. That's my first
Good
time.
training, good training.
We don't have a formal PowerPoint presentation on this item. It's pulled for voting
Sure.
purposes, but I could certainly speak to the item if desired.
Anyone need her to speak to the item? All right, then, thank you, ma'am. At this time, I'll entertain a motion on item 6K.
I'll make a motion to approve item K.
I'll second that motion.
I have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Walker. We have a second by Councilmember Long. Council, please cast your vote. Item 6K passes 4 votes yes, 0 votes no, and 1 abstention. Moving on to the regular agenda. This item is the first reading and a public hearing to consider adopting an ordinance authorizing a rezoning request from general retail to planned development general retail with the vertical mixed-use development and site plan on 0.379 plus or minus acres described as Lot 7 and a portion of Lot 8, Block 10, HP Robertson Edition, addressed as 1120 South First Street. Mr. Chandler.
All right, thank you, Mayor and Council. And the applicant for this vertical mixed-use project, Mod Architecture, we have 2 representatives in the audience in case y'all have any questions after the presentation. And so just to give you a little bit of an overview, this is, as you mentioned in the item description, 0.379 acres on South First Street at the northwest corner with Avenue 11 or L, excuse me. And so this, because it's a vertical mixed use project, it will use a combination of general retail standards, which of course the general retail standards already apply, but adding a planned development and pulling mixed use standards, which fit this project better. And so those are the combination of those will be applied to this project. It would include 3 non-residential units on the ground floor, and then 8 residential units on floors 2 and 3. And that's what makes it the vertical mixed use project, to have the residential above the non-residential. Meets the first and third overlay and in terms of the frontage standards related to sidewalks and landscaping. Much of that was already provided by the city from a previous CDBG sidewalk project that y'all are probably aware of on South First Street, but also along Avenue L. It also supports the adjacent future land use TMED district, as well as the Midtown Neighborhood Plan. And so here you can see the site, in case you were wondering where exactly is that, what does it look like? And so on the east of it, you can see across First Street what that looks like. In the north, that's Popalock facility there. And then to the south is insurance. And then to the west, so you do have residential, but you also have an alley between this site and adjacent single family. So here are 2 plans as part of essentially the development or site plan. On the left, it shows what those non-residential tenant spaces, where they would be located. And then on the right, you can see where parking would be located, and there will be tuck under parking as well. So the parking spaces that you see here are not all that will be provided. And then of course you got the lot to the north. And then also the landscaping. So despite this being a dense mixed use development, they're able to meet the landscaping requirements as well. And so a quick summary of the land use plan. We talked about the general retail base zoning and that the dimensional standards for the mixed use district would apply here that better fit this product, thus the plan development. Parking would comply with the UDC requirements in section 7.5. And then also including for the residential units, 4 covered parking spaces, 21 uncovered spaces for a total of 25. The landscaping mentioned 6%, which exceeds our minimum of 5%. And then looking at the building elevations, you can see building pushed up close to the street, very much an urban product, which you would expect in a mixed-use development like this. And then the view from the south at the top, that's what you would see from Avenue L. And then from the north, you can see that at the bottom. And then I want to draw your attention to the top elevation, which is essentially what you would see from the alley or from the neighboring backyard. So you can see very few windows, and balconies are not facing those yards. The balconies are on the north and south elevations, not on the west. So I think that's important in terms of making this project a good neighbor. Looking at the zoning map, you can see the general retail base zoning district. And then the future development plan, this is located within future urban residential, which certainly this project fits well within that category. And then the blue just to the south, of course, is TMED. And so this is very much a TMED looking product, which encourages mixed use. But this is a kind of a first outside of downtown to have a true vertical mixed use project. Most of what we see in the TMED area, like the district across from Baylor Scott and White, that's really a horizontal mixed use product. Retail at the front, the residential is behind it, but not on top of each other. So 18 notices were sent out to property owners within 200 feet. 3 were returned in agreement, 1 of those from the applicant, and 0 in disagreement. And so staff recommends approval subject to the following conditions: substantial compliance with the site development plan and the associated plans we just looked at, compliance with the First and Third Street overlay standards. The planning and development director has authority to make minor approval to minor modifications. And then significant changes, of course, would come back to planning and zoning and council. And planning and zoning at the July 17th meeting recommended approval per the staff recommendation 6-0. And that's all that I have. Happy to answer any questions. Once again, Mod Architecture is here as well.
Great. Thank you, sir. Council, any questions for Mr. Chandler? This item is subject to a public hearing, and anyone wishing to speak may do so. Please step to the podium and state your name for the record, or raise your hand on the virtual platform. Okay, there being none of either, council, I will, if there's nothing else for Mr. Chandler, I will entertain a motion on item 7.
I move to approve item 7 with the staff recommendations included.
Second that motion.
Have a motion by Councilmember Pilkington. We have a second by Councilmember Grant. Council, please cast your vote. Item 7 passes 5 votes to 0. Congratulations. That is a great project. And thank you all for stepping out there and doing that. That'll much needed. So thank you very much. Moving on to item 8 is the first reading in a public hearing to consider adopting an ordinance rezoning 0.358 plus or minus acres described as lot 9 and 10, block 11, Northwest Hills First Extension replat, which is blocks 11 and 12, addressed as 2305 and 2309 Valley Forge Avenue, from commercial to multifamily dwelling. Mr. Chandler.
All right, thank you, Mayor. So we're going from an exciting new development to rezoning to accommodate existing development. And so this is an applicant that you've seen before in a similar situation, owns 2 properties that are subject to this rezoning that are multifamily, but they're zoned commercial, and multifamily is not allowed in commercial. And so just to let you know, this is within the Northwest Hills neighborhood plan, which is, I believe, the next one that we as a city are going to tackle. And so we're going to look at the zoning comprehensively to address these kind of situations and perhaps an overlay, but this applicant wanted to proceed for probably selling purposes or just investment purposes. But this is also similar in size to the previous project, 0.358 acres, and it's 2 existing fourplexes, or sometimes called quads. And as I mentioned, it's not allowed in the current C or commercial zoning. And the applicant owns both these properties and then the previous one that you all saw recently on Salisbury. So in the same neighborhood, same area. And so this would bring it into compliance. And as I mentioned, this is part of the future Northwest Hills Neighborhood Planning District. This is also within TISD. And so here you can see the property, and it's surrounded by multifamily of some variety. And so utilities, of course, are existing. It's along local streets. 27 notices were sent out to property owners within 200 feet, and the only response received was in agreement. Staff recommends approval of the rezoning from commercial to multifamily 1.
Council, anything for Mr. Chandler?
I do have one quick question. We're just getting ready to do, or at least very soon, that neighborhood development plan. Is this, are we pushing something? Are we potentially approving something that might not fit what comes in once that development plan is done? I mean, I realize that there are lots of hypotheticals in that question. I'm sorry for that, but it worries me a little bit.
Sure. I don't think so. I mean, I think considering the reality that this is pretty much all multifamily, maybe there would be a long range part of that plan to transition to some other residential. I mean, as you saw, Valley Forge is not, it's not a collector, it's not an arterial,
Right.
it's a local street. And so residential makes a ton of sense there, much more than commercial. So I wouldn't envision that there would be a conflict.
Okay.
But at this time, there certainly is not. And this is, an application by the property owner for his own investment purposes, and perhaps urged by a title company or a lender. And so I think for today, it makes a ton of sense.
Okay, thank you.
Kind of a cleanup,
Yeah, it
more
is.
or less.
It is.
Okay. Anything else? Item 8, subject to a public hearing. We ask you step to the podium, state your name for the record, or raise your hand on the platform. Okay, there's none of either, so I will close the public hearing. Council, entertain a motion on item 8.
Mayor, I'll second that motion.
We have a motion by Councilmember Grant. We have a second by Councilmember Long. Council, please cast your vote. Item 8 passes 5 votes to 0. Moving on to item 9 is the first reading and a public hearing to consider adopting an ordinance authorizing a 5-year franchise with Acadian Ambulance Service to provide non-emergency ambulance transfer services within the city. Chief.
Mayor, council, thank you. This is another non-emergency ambulance franchise renewal for Acadian Ambulance. They've been a franchise, non-emergency franchise here in the city for over 15 years with us. They are a good partner with us, and they do most of the rollover emergency service that when AMR is tied up or unavailable. So they are a primary emergency backup. And again, they're a good partner with us here in the city. And I do have a couple of representatives here, and I think they'll be speaking here in just a moment.
Okay. Very good. Council, anything? This item is also subject to a public hearing. Step to the podium and state your name or raise your hand on the platform.
Good evening, Ron Caranto, Regional Vice President for Acadian Ambulance. Thank you, Chief. I just want to thank you, Mr. Mayor, and the council for the opportunity. We've had a great relationship between Acadian Ambulance and the city, providing medical transportation, and we look forward to continuing that relationship. So thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Thank y'all for the services you provide. Anybody else? All right, then I will close the public hearing on item 9 and entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve item 9.
Second.
We have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Walker. We have a second by Councilmember Pilkington. Council, please cast your vote. Item 9 passes 5 votes to 0. Moving on to item 10 is consider adopting a resolution approving an applicant's appeal exceptions on the I-35 corridor overlay standards related to a maximum sign height and maximum sign size and required wheel stops for property addressed as 6614 North General Bruce Drive.
All right, thank you, Mayor and Council. Of course, this is an I-35 corridor overlay appeal to a couple standards. This is for the northwest corner of current Hart Road and I-35, but as you all know, this is also the future outer loop location. So key location within as a gateway into Temple. This is directly across from Lucky's RV Park to the south. And this property is in the gateway sub-district of the overlay. And so the two appeals, one is related to their proposed pylon signs, requesting 45 feet instead of the allowed maximum of 35 feet, and a area of the signage of 229.4 square feet rather than 200, which is the current limit in the overlay. And then also a really small one, but in the code, wheel stops are required. You know, the concrete kind of curbs that keep you from rolling into a building or someone else. Instead of that in front of the store, like many gas stations within the city, they would prefer to have bollards, essentially the poles in the ground, and they would have wheel stops elsewhere. And so looking at the site plan, this is currently unplatted land, and that has been used as a gas station and among other things, but so it'd have to be platted. It's segmented off that there's a portion in there that 0.3 acres, that is an existing billboard. So just wanted to point that out. That is not affected by this request. That's along General Bruce. So of course, this site plan is turned 90 degrees. And they would meet the landscaping standards and the architectural standards for the overlay. And so on the right, you can see what that pylon sign looks like. They're showing that they meet the masonry requirements of that sign. Originally, they requested a 70-foot variance. We wouldn't, as staff, be able to support that. We do support the 45 feet because that would actually be consistent with other gas stations along the corridor. And there are some elevation changes of the overpass at I-35 in this location. And so we do support the 45 feet and the equivalent square footage increase. You can see that's a proportional sign. And so the site photos, the site needs some help. So this would certainly be a huge improvement from the current conditions. And there is that billboard referenced previously, not impacted by this development. And just on the left, this is an example of a similar sign off I-14 in Killeen. And then on the right is a 45-foot tall sign by one of the competitors of Quick Trip. This is Techstar Travel Center. They're at the northwest corner of Nugent and I-35. And so staff recommends approval of both the 45 feet and the 229.4 square feet. And honestly, we would support a larger square footage, but Kyle told us we couldn't do that because that was increasing the actual request. So yes, Kyle keeps us in line, but so that we could have the signage essentially squared off with the gas price signs as well. And then also staff recommends approval of the protective bollards as requested. And Planning and Zoning Commission voted 6-0 to recommend approval per staff recommendation. And that's all that I have. Happy to answer any questions.
Very good. Thank you. Council, any questions for Mr. Chandler? That'll be a nice project. That's no, just that's going to be quite a cleanup. That's been an eyesore for a long time.
Brian, could you explain? Well, let me back up. I
Mhm.
worked on the original working group. It seems like 100 years ago, but it
Mhm.
wasn't, on the I-35 overlay.
Yes.
And you had one of your that one, thank
Okay, there you
you.
go. Just tell me
The
when to stop.
comparison photos, that's what I'm trying to say.
Yes, ma'am.
How is this going to relate in size to the one over the Techstar Travel Center?
It's essentially the same size.
Okay, so why in our overlay requirements, why did we put the height where we have it in the overlay requirements?
Well, so the overlay has evolved. Originally, it was actually an 8-foot limit.
Right,
Monument
which was
signs.
clearly
which
not
did not-
reasonable for I-35. I get that.
Right. They were, then the standards were amended in 2018. And so just addressed appropriately at the time by council to
Right,
revisit the height. And so 25 feet if it's at the property line, and then a max of 35 feet if it's pushed back 10 feet. So 1 foot for every additional foot of height beyond 25 feet. So it's something that that will be evaluated again with the UDC update. Perhaps this will be the new standard.
okay, so
yeah,
it- I'm fretting over nothing at this point. You're too polite to say yes, but I'm fretting over nothing.
Councilmember Long, I can say that from my memory, previous councils have desired to keep the standards fairly strict and consider exception requests like this to allow for case-by-case considerations versus raising the or lowering, I guess, if you will, the overall standard. So that had been the previous preference of councils going back, is to not quite ready to wholesale change the standard,
Exactly.
but would rather consider it on a case-by-case basis. Obviously, right now, as we're going through the Unified Development Code update, staff, in conjunction with the focus groups and community input, might bring forward some changes. But I think that's the perspective that previous councils would rather see it on a case-by-case basis than just a wholesale change to the standard.
Okay. Again, I'm fretting over nothing. It's fine.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Well, a number of years ago, these were coming forward, probably 5 or 6 a year.
Yes.
And we've always granted the variance. I can't think of a time that we didn't.
Was the Techstar a variance is why it's high or?
Honestly, I don't know. That honestly, that could have been missed.
And clearly it's an enormous improvement over the existing lot.
Yes, if y'all remember, that was an existing building that was adapted, which under the old code would not have allowed that adaptive reuse of the building. So, but yeah, I'd have to look into the sign in terms of, whether that should have come forward. I don't recall that it did.
Council, anything else? All right. Then at this time, council, I will entertain a motion on item 10.
Mayor, since I was the one causing fretting, I will make a motion to approve item 10 as presented by Mr. Chandler.
You weren't causing fretting. You were the only one fretting.
I caused myself fretting.
I'll second it.
Very good. We have a motion by Councilmember Long. We have a second by Mayor Pro Tem Walker. Council, please cast your vote. Item 10 passes 5 votes to 0. It is 5:45. Thank you all for attending, and this meeting is adjourned.